Hello and welcome back to the Elite Formula Physio and Training podcast. And we're back into race week. It's Spa, historically one of the super fun tracks, but we've also had a bit of a break, haven't we, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a few weekends off, so it's a nice little reset for a lot of the guys. I think it's a nice little reset. 2 weekends off, I think it is, and yeah, just before our final push into the summer break, really.
Yeah, I find it a weird one because obviously summer break is here. So, you've got 2.5 weeks off, 2 weekends off, then you've got two races, then you're going to have 3.5 weeks off anyway. It's a hard one to get your head around kind of what you should do. And I guess it matters in the context of, your season. Yeah, it could be 2.5 weeks to work super hard, get yourself ready to win the last couple of races before summer break, go into it on a high. I was actually on holiday in Monaco and saw Oscar training along the coast, and also saw him posting laps on the simulator of Spa the other day on social media. But then on the flip side, you've got some of the drivers taking a holiday and sitting on a beach. What would you be doing right now? What would your focus be?
Yeah, it's a tough question, isn't it? I think it's individualized, isn't it? I think it all depends on a lot of factors, and I think this is where I think the relationship and understanding your drive, I think is really important. I mean, like you could look, like you said, Oscar looks like he's had to put in a real shift over the last 2 weeks. In comparison to, let's say, Yuki, it looks like he's had a little bit of a break actually in the last 2 weeks. Knowing John, Yuki's performance coach, I have absolutely no doubt. It's very easy for someone to look at and go, oh, Yuki's having a bit of time off, but you know for a fact that there'll be no stone unturned there, and he's training well, and it seems like he's in a good headspace. So I think in answer to that question, it probably comes down to a couple of things. I think if you think that any holes that you need to close, it's a nice opportunity to kind of put a nice little training block down and not have to worry too much about fatigue. But on the flip side of that, it's a lovely opportunity if things, that heavy travel block, if you're feeling a bit fatigued, to try and maybe keep a level of training up whilst also perhaps just having a bit of time away from the sport and creating some of those headspace breaks. So I think if it was me, to be honest, if we were to like put a blanket generalization over it, I think I'd still be wanting to keep a level of training and fitness up. I think from a mental fatigue point of view, trying to scope out maybe an opportunity for the driver to have some time away from the team, have some time away from our coaches, and some time with some friends and family and structured way, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's context based, isn't it? I think if I was Oscar and Lando, I'd been working my nuts off to try and be ready to go and win these last two races, because that could be a turning point of the season. Win the last two races before summer break, carry the momentum in, confidence over the summer break, all the visualization work, come back strong. Or, on the flip side, you lose those two races and get knocked off your groove, you know, lead cut or lead extended, and then you go into summer break, you're in your own head, they're in your head, and everything starts to spiral. So, Oscar and Lando, I'd be pushing, training hard, mental work, simulator work, visualization work, making sure I'm in the best possible physical and mental shape to go and win these two races. And then, yeah, if it's been a tough season, Max, although he's not out of the title fight, I'd probably be saying, we need to take a bit of time away from F1 and just, shut social media off, shut the noise off, reset, and get ready to, try and get what we can out of the car coming back. Similarly, probably some of the rookie drivers need to be working super hard to make sure they can impress for these two races, whilst other drivers who maybe are underperforming need to do a bit of a reset as well, and block out some of the noise, get away from the sport for a bit, and kind of not rediscover the love for it, but rediscover
Yeah.
their kind of position within the team, within one, and basically fight for a seat for next year as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point you make. I think, yeah, absolutely, especially with the rookies. I mean, one of the things, one of the driver coaches posted this week again, which is again really emphasises your point around the rookies, is the prep work for Spa is really heavy. Like, you've got a track that is longer, more complex from a statistical point of view. We're having to run a lot more scenarios on the sim, in terms of like dry setups, wet setups, damp setups, things like that. So when we're going to tracks, certain tracks of the world, these and things like that, we've got a fairly narrow window of maybe what we think the weather may or may not be doing. So all of a sudden, the track goes Spa with the length, the variability, like you say, if you're in a rookie seat and needing to deliver, especially at this point in the season, we were chatting actually just before the podcast. People think we're only halfway through the season, but actually, I always think in a weird way, you're at the end of the season from like a decision-making point of view. There will be a lot of decisions that start getting made at the end of the summer break. So if you put your contracts on edge, you want to be delivering in these last couple of races. So yeah, this 2 weeks could be a real big push, and you've earned the 3 weeks off in a few weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to over rookies, actually you've got two quite, physically demanding tracks in different ways there as well. Spa, as you said, long track. It's physical in terms of the G forces, the speed, the mental load, and pressure going through there as well. And then, Budapest, we always know is super hot. So again, fatigue element there. You've just been given an extended block to get yourself a little bit fitter, a little bit sharper to go into that training simulator most days and grabbing sort of recovery either side of that to make sure that we can keep training, keep working, and get ready for those. So, but yeah, context for sure. But if I'm fighting for a championship or if I'm a rookie looking to keep my seat, it's push, push, push in these off periods. There are no off days, as they say. But that leads us nicely into Spa prep. What are the drivers really having to prepare for?
Yeah, so iconic track. Everyone knows, Spa for probably being the most well-known F1 circuit in the world. In terms of what to expect, it's a long circuit, so just over 7 kilometers. Anyone who's seen any of the runs that get posted around Spa, it's a tough old slog. It's elevation change of 100 meters from the lowest point to the highest point. If anyone's ever, say, run up, jogged up, walked up, decided to not jog and walk the rest of the Rouge, it is steep, it's pretty brutal, but even the rest of the track, there's a lot of elevation change. I think that's the big thing to note with Spa. Being 7 kilometers, the one thing a lot of people say, a lot of people say to me, well, the track 6 kilometers, really 1,000 meters, what difference does it make? But actually, the distance that we have at Spa, we can have one weather condition in the pit lane, and we can have completely different weather conditions the other side of the track. So, we've had it many a time over the past where you could be in pit lane in the dry and you're getting radio reports from drivers saying there's a whole sector that is completely wet. Yeah, which can make it super challenging for engineers and setup. So that's something definitely to consider. In terms of corners to look out for, obviously we've got to start with Eau Rouge. Obviously turns 2 to 4. You've kind of got anywhere from kind of 4.5 to 5G of vertical and lateral load. The vertical load is quite an interesting one for us. We get a lot of lateral load across a lot of circuits, but to get that level of vertical load, and particularly with the way that they've redesigned the circuit there now, it's a really fast part of the track. Always has been, but the ability to get that huge neck stability through that, especially with those rapid steering corrections and micro adjustments. It's a really tough physical corner. Looking forward to turn 10, a double apex left-hander, high speed again, so nearly flat out. So again, sustained lateral G-force, grip fade kind of late into the stint. So again, it can be a really tricky corner for the drivers because you're already fatigued from the high lateral G-forces and grips fading, so you can get quite an unpredictable car. So interesting section. And then really the other corner really to look for, I think that's super interesting as far is the bus stop chicane. So turn 19 and 20, heavy braking, so 300 plus kilometers an hour down to 80 kilometers an hour. So huge amounts of load on the kind of posterior chain. Yeah, really, really challenging. A great opportunity again for leaders. From a statistics point of view, in terms of the track, things to look for. It's a really mentally, it's really challenging. It only sounds like a few more corners than most tracks, but anyone who's ever played around on a sim and thought about memorizing a certain sector, when you're looking to double those sectors and having a lot more, it makes it super hard for them to learn. So the cognitive and physical load of Spa is tough.
Yeah, and it's obviously super important, with what we were talking about before with rookies and, how do you prepare for this? And, this is where simulator work becomes so prominent and so good in racing these days because it's high level visualization for these guys. You get to practice laps over and over again. And, what certainly we used to do at Red Bull with the junior team and what I know Major will do. you chuck in different setups, you chuck in different weathers, you get them practicing everything, because you're essentially getting perfect practice over and over again. It's, as I said, high level visualization. So as a rookie driver over these last 2.5 weeks, you're going to be doing a ton of that, getting yourself ready to, prove yourself. I always remember Saudi Arabia first came on the calendar. So we were based there October or November 2021. And no teams had a simulator model of the track. And so Max managing to find someone who managed to build him a copy so he could, practice the track. And that's how far Max, 4-time world champion, is willing to practice over and over again when he's getting to new tracks or tracks that he wants to perfect. I think that's a great example for young drivers there, and practicing different environments, conditions, different setups, getting somebody to change the setup without you knowing, and then you have to go out and on the simulator and tell them what the change is. I think all these things are really important for rookie drivers to be doing. And then obviously, as you mentioned there's the neck stress, and there's a different kind of loaded through the neck with the elevation. We've got a few elevation tracks coming up, particularly after summer break as well, with Zandvoort and Austin. What would you implement different in kind of training programs to help them manage that?
Yeah, good question. I think it's when we're looking at kind of the kind of vertical forces there, I mean, I think certainly modifying around different parts of the neck, so getting into some of those deeper neck muscles is really important. A lot of the time, a lot of people see on Instagram a lot of the lateral neck stuff, which is absolutely fantastic, but trying to look at some of the deeper neck muscles is also really important. We're also looking at breathing techniques, a lot of core work as well. When we think about vertical load, we're looking at probably a good way of, I always think of kind of talking through vertical load when we look at G forces in fighter pilots. If anyone's ever seen a centrifugal machine, I don't know what they call it, with a pilot, and we look at how it drains the blood out of their head. Ultimately, there we're trying to work on keeping as much of that blood in the upper limbs as we possibly can. So working on your ability to control breathing and maintain blood pressure and kind of get breathing right going into corner with vertical Gs is also really important.
Yeah, absolutely. It just helps to disperse the downward forces and axial compression. I don't know if I mentioned it on the last podcast. You remind me about the neck strengthening study that came out about a month ago, and it showed that actually rotational strength is the best to protect the neck and protect you from traumatic brain injury in particular. That's what they were looking at in terms of like road traffic accidents and stuff. It leads in quite nicely to what we do, because you're right. Historically, there's a lot of lateral stuff, a lot of isometric lateral stuff. But when we look at how the neck muscles work, most of them are in diagonal slings, most of them run through a rotational element. Obviously, F1 drivers need to turn their head. So actually being strong in rotational force is probably the biggest element for reducing risk of injury and then recovery post-injury as well. So I can't remember if I mentioned that before or not, but I'll mention it again anyway.
It's a good point, and it's definitely one that drivers need to be wise on, and that's it's a good area, but it can be a trickier area to train as well. As, like, I always think again, it's simple for us because we get to do it a lot, but playing on the rotational force, a lot of clients that we work with on a day-to-day basis, actually, rotational drills can be a little bit harder to set up, but actually you reap the rewards from fantastic drills, and it's interesting to see more and more papers come out, as you say, particularly around brain injuries, concussion guidelines, and this kind of rotational strength.
Yeah, for sure. And that actually leads us nicely into our kind of next bit that we were going to talk about. But I will just say, you mentioned the run around Spa, and it's probably one of the best. It's super nice scenery when it's not absolutely hammering it down with rain. But you're right, it's a tough run. But it's a lot of people, use that as a barometer of their fitness over the course of the season. I've ran it both ways. Actually, running it the normal way is better. Because you get more like sustained incline if you go the other way. And going down a route is just as tough as going up it. You realize how steep it is when you go down it. more than up it, but it is it's tough. And I always find sector three is the one that catches your eye. It's like it's a
Yeah.
long sustained incline. You're like, oh, when's this going to end?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a bit where you think, like I say, you're always ready for a reach, and you kind of
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you come out of it,
managing expectations.
yeah, exactly. And then you get caught out with the late uphill.
Yeah, yeah. All about managing expectations. Really. A lot about that. So super interesting paper that came out this year in May,
Yeah,
May
this
or
year,
June.
2025.
Yeah, and really kind of one of the first of its kind. And as we said before, Formula One is always a bit kind of clouded in secrecy, and we're getting more and more papers coming out. But I think just because of the nature of the teams being clouded in secrecy because of having to protect car developments and updates on the car and stuff there, and it's kind of filtered into like the sports science, the physio, the training, all that sort of stuff. But it's becoming more and more sort of open as we go, and we're seeing more and more papers. So, study looked at kind of reviewed injuries in Formula One drivers from 1950 to 2023. So, 70 over 70 years, 73 years. But they took it from like publicly documented injuries. So, you can imagine that it's quite a lot higher. Lots of kind of drivers probably not reporting concussions or neck pain or lower back pain. As these things crop up and aren't going to be reported in, I guess, public domains and public documents. But what it did do was give us a kind of really nice outlook of what injuries are reducing, what injuries are not reducing over a 70-year period. You'd expect from the 50s to now, or you'd hope that all injuries were reducing, but actually some aren't, which give us some stuff that we can work on into the future. And obviously, they recorded sort of casualties as well, and obviously they're on the down as well. But I think
Yeah.
Spa is historically one of the most dangerous tracks as well, so it's quite a nice interlude to kind of talk about injuries within there. So what did you sort of take from that, mate?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? When you've worked in it all these years, you kind of look at, I was quite interested actually when I was looking at the motorsport had the highest injury rates per 100,000, which was, it was 532 per 100,000 participants a year, which exceeded most other sports.
Mm.
Like you say, considering that a lot weren't reported, admittedly, I've seen a lot of other sports would be a similar scenario. Yeah, weirdly, I don't know why I was quite surprised by that. But yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? I think it's on one side of things, it's amazing. I think it highlights some of the work that F1's done over the years. Invention of halo hands devices, like carbon monocoques, all this kind of stuff. Fantastic documentary if anyone's interested. Is the documentary on Sid Watkins. I don't know if you caught that, the F1 doctor who really kind of led the way on a lot of safety and F1 was fantastic. Kind of highlights really that safety is one of these weird things. I think too political, where ultimately like putting safety interventions in place is a very expensive thing to do and isn't necessarily in the interest of these businesses that are piling money into sports. It's the last thing they really want to spend money on. Um, as much as we push for it from the medical side of things. So it's great to see that the papers like this are coming out because they do highlight areas where we need to improve, but it's great to see, I guess, the numbers coming down. It was interesting that highlighted around still those frontal anterior lateral injuries still being the ones that are probably most problematic in motorsport or the most likely to be catastrophic. I think certainly, like you say, I think Spa is one that always brings it home for us. That even in recent years, in my 7 years of motorsport now, been involved in 3 or 4 fatalities whilst being at Spa. So like, we do see them at Spa. It's got a bit of an unfortunate history. How many of them are preventable? And there's always up for a bit of debate. But yeah, it brings it home for sure on a racetrack like Spa.
Yeah, absolutely, and definitely good to see those coming down. Injury wise, from our point of view, musculoskeletal wise, we saw from there that the lower extremity injuries were all declining. I think what was most interesting for me was neck and lower back and spine showed no change in injury rate over the 73 years, which, given where we are with, well, I guess that's probably better than the general population, because actually back pain's gone up in general population in the Western world. So I guess that's actually against the norm, funny enough. But given everything we know and the more research data, training that we have, I'd still expect it to come down to be able to manage it a little bit better. I know there's obviously going to be anomalies like 2022 when low back pain shot through the roof because of the stiffer cars and bits there, but you think would be bulletproof in these drives a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You're right. It's kind of always get the same question as a physician. What injuries are the drivers picking up? And they're always quite surprised when we kind of pick up these back injuries. But it's a difficult position, isn't it? When someone was to ask me how do we improve our drivers, and ultimately it's why we go back to the justification. How many times have we been quizzed over the years when you look at drivers? And I think it's kind of the world's coming around to it a bit. When we've got these drivers in the gym and they're getting really good squat numbers, deadlift numbers, things like that, and people can go out and drive. Even drivers sometimes, they can question it and go, I don't need, to have a good deadlift number or whatever. But actually, it's the ability for your physical frame to be able to absorb these frequent loads that we might see in a car setting, but also these catastrophic loads that we see, take a max going into the wall and putting double-figure G's through his body. So it's really important for a number of reasons that we are thinking outside of the box when it comes to their training.
Yeah. Like the term bulletproof in the body, you're not, albeit the driving the car is physical enough in this day and age with the G-forces, the heat, the fatigue, the tracks and the speed of the cars now. But also, yeah, you're right, bumps, crashes into the wall. It's how strong can you be to then quickly recover thereafter as well. And then one other nice little finding, just to kind of finish us off, was first of all, more race entries equal more injuries, which kind of makes sense. More races you do, the more likely you are to get injured. But the one I liked was higher career points equaled fewer injuries. So potentially there, you're more experienced drivers, you're better drivers, I guess because they're better, they're able to complete more races, race longer, fewer incidences. So I thought, yeah, technical skill aid in injury reduction. And I think that's been found in other sports as well. I don't want to recall it off the top of my head, but I think I've seen that in maybe NFL or somewhere. Higher rated players are less likely to get injured.
It's a tough one, isn't it? And even like knowing the sport, you're right. There's part of me that's like, is there a skill element to this? You're right. You look at someone like the Maxes, the Landos, the Steins, and you look at some of their one-to-one battles and their ability to stay on top of it's fantastic. But then the flip side is, if anyone who knows motorsport, if you get caught in mid to back, he's also aware of the chaos that unfolds in there. How good you are, even with Max, you go and put him in the middle, the chances of getting caught up and tangled up in the carnage is very, very realistic. So it's such a hard one, isn't it? It's whether if someone's got strong car, are they then better and out of trouble and theoretical injury, reduce their chance of injuries? It's such a tough one, but yeah, really interesting bit of data that comes from. I think there's probably a bit of boost at play there. It's super interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right. You end up in that midfield bit, and at a start, you've got to see how Kimi went into Max the other day, completely took him out off the start. I guess you can look at it in a way of, when was the last time someone like Max crashed in quali or in practice, or it's that skill maybe of working for a race weekend even, and not always on track and not always in a race. Whereas you can probably name a few drivers, both senior and rookie, that end up causing instances in quali and free practice and regularly in races, which are obviously going to lead to more injuries.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it's also probably worth thinking about as well that even the mid-pack excuse we could use is that actually, you're right, a lot of these big crashes that we see historically, the ones that are problematic crashes that result, unfortunately, in larger injuries, are generally not a turn one incident. Turn one incidences are generally slower speed, knocks, bumps, whereas actually, like you say, these big quali pushes and safety car restarts and things that are very technical are probably where we have some of the nastier crashes. or wet conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, super nice paper. It's free to download online. It was I'm gonna get it. I'm just gonna look up the name just so I don't get it wrong. It was Braithwaite et al. 2025. If anyone's interested in it, you can download it for free on. And yeah, anything else to say on Spa in the upcoming week, mate?
Yeah, no, I think it'd be a good race to watch. I think it's always a great race in terms of like it offers a lot. So I think it's a good one to watch and a great one for the drivers. Ultimately, I always think as a performance coach, it's a really great one to have some fun with. You know, it's one of the few tracks where the drivers, I think, always just get to show us their skill because it's really hard to put a car together for the engineers that works well everywhere in Spa. It's just not really the case. It's always a matter of compromise. So it's where I think the drivers and the performance coaches get to have the most effect in kind of showing adaptability across a race weekend, you know, changing conditions, a car that you have to kind of, you know, it might be great in one part of the track, but not so great in others. So it's a really fun circuit for us to work in. So expect drama, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll lead it off with if those drivers, it's a proper drivers track, and if those drivers aren't heading out there and showing us everything they've got, then they've just wasted 2.5 weeks of good prep sitting on a beach somewhere.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the week, enjoys the weekend, and we'll be back next week to review whatever happens and look ahead to Budapest, and also what people should be doing over the summer break. Both drivers, and we'll touch in on how you can maximise some time off over the summer holidays for anyone wanting to kind of kickstart a fitness journey and stuff there. Until then, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. See you next week.